Theme: Native Peoples of North America, Cultures and Traditions. When we think of America before the arrival of Europeans, it's easy to imagine one single group of Native Americans. But the truth is far richer. Long before Columbus set sail, North America was alive with extraordinary diversity. From the frozen Arctic to the swamps of Florida, from the deserts of the Southwest to the forests of the Northeast, millions of people lived across this vast land. They spoke hundreds of languages, followed different ways of life, and carried on traditions shaped by the landscapes they called home. To understand America's true beginnings, we must start here, with the First Nations of this continent, the original caretakers of the land. By the time Europeans arrived, historians estimate that 10 to 18 million people lived in North America. They belonged to hundreds of nations, each with its own customs, government, and worldview. Some lived in small bands of hunters and gatherers. Others built great cities with plazas, pyramids, and trade networks that stretched for thousands of miles. And though they were distinct, they all shared something profound, a deep connection to the land, to community, and to spirit. North America is a continent of extremes: snowy mountains, vast plains, scorching deserts, thick forests, winding rivers, and endless coasts. The native peoples adapted to each of these environments in remarkable ways. In the Arctic, the Inuit and Aleut thrived where few could survive, hunting seals, whales, and caribou. In the plains, nations like the Lakota and Cheyenne followed the great buffalo herds. In the Southwest, the Pueblo peoples built villages of adobe and stone, farming the dry desert with ingenious irrigation. In the Northeast woodlands, the Iroquois and Algonquian peoples lived in longhouses, hunted deer, and grew corn, beans, and squash. Along the Pacific Northwest coast, the Tlingit, Haida, and Kwakiutl built massive wooden houses and carved towering totem poles, supported by rich salmon runs. Each environment gave shape to a culture. The land wasn't just a backdrop, it was the heart of life itself. Despite their differences, many native traditions shared common themes. For native peoples, the land, animals, and sky were alive with spirit. The earth was not owned, it was shared, borrowed from future generations. Stories, myths, and legends carried wisdom across generations. Elders passed down histories, creation stories, and lessons through storytelling, songs, and dances. Tribes were more than political units. They were extended families, with obligations to one another. Decisions were made not just for the present but for the seventh generation to come. Many traditions emphasized harmony, between people and nature, between men and women, between the physical and the spiritual. Ceremonies, dances, and rituals helped restore balance when it was lost. Let's begin our journey with the peoples of the Northeast, where thick forests stretched from the Great Lakes to the Atlantic coast. Here lived the Iroquois Confederacy, also known as the Haudenosaunee, or People of the Longhouse. They were made up of 5 nations, the Mohawk, Oneida, Onondaga, Cayuga, and Seneca, later joined by the Tuscarora. Their government was remarkable. They formed a great league of peace, one of the oldest participatory democracies in the world. Chiefs, chosen by clan mothers, met in council to resolve disputes and make decisions for the whole Confederacy. This system so impressed European settlers that some historians believe it influenced the framers of the U.S. Constitution. The Iroquois lived in longhouses, wooden structures that could stretch over 200 feet, housing multiple families from the same clan. Agriculture was central, women tended the fields of corn, beans, and squash, the 3 sisters. Men hunted deer, fished, and engaged in trade and warfare. Nearby, the Algonquian-speaking peoples lived in smaller villages, often in wigwams, dome-shaped houses covered in bark or reeds. They were semi-nomadic, moving with the seasons to follow game and harvest crops. Moving south, we come to the fertile lands of the Mississippi River Valley and the Southeast. Here, great mound-building cultures once thrived. The most famous was Cahokia, near modern-day St. Louis, which around 1000 CE was larger than many European cities, with tens of thousands of residents, plazas, and massive earthen pyramids. By the time of European contact, nations like the Cherokee, Creek, Choctaw, and Seminole lived across the region. They were skilled farmers, cultivating maize, beans, squash, and tobacco. Their towns were organized around central plazas for councils, dances, and ceremonies. Leadership often combined political and spiritual authority, with chiefs serving as both rulers and mediators with the spirit world. The Southeast was rich with traditions of storytelling, music, and dance, each ceremony woven into the cycles of nature. Today, we often imagine the Plains Indians riding horses across the grasslands, but that image belongs to a later era. Before horses were introduced by the Spanish in the 1500s, the Plains peoples lived in a different rhythm. They hunted buffalo on foot, using clever techniques like driving herds into corrals or over cliffs. Buffalo provided food, clothing, shelter, and tools. Nearly every part of the animal was used. Plains villages often included earth lodges or teepees made from buffalo hide stretched over wooden frames. Societies were organized into bands and clans, with leadership based on skill, wisdom, and generosity. Spiritual life centered around the buffalo, the sun, and the sacred pipe, a symbol of peace and prayer. By the time we reach this point in our journey, we've only begun to glimpse the vast diversity of Native America. From the forests of the Northeast to the river valleys of the Southeast and the open grasslands of the plains, each nation carried its own traditions, yet all shared a deep bond with the land and with community. In the next part of our story, we will travel westward, into the deserts of the Southwest, the towering peaks of the Rockies, and the rich coastal waters of the Pacific Northwest, to discover even more traditions, innovations, and ways of life among the first peoples of this continent. Part 2. We've walked through the woodlands and rivers of the East, and across the sweeping grasslands of the Great Plains. But the story of Native America stretches even further, into some of the most dramatic landscapes on Earth, from scorching deserts to icy seas, from coastal rainforests to volcanic plateaus. Each of these environments called for unique adaptations. And the peoples who lived there not only survived, they thrived, creating cultures and traditions as enduring as the mountains, forests, and seas themselves. The American Southwest is a land of extremes, blazing sun, dry deserts, towering mesas, and rare rivers cutting through canyons. For thousands of years, native peoples here turned this harsh landscape into a home. The ancestral Puebloans, once called Anasazi, built cliff dwellings at places like Mesa Verde and great houses at Chaco Canyon. These weren't just homes, they were cities, with multi-story stone buildings, plazas, and kivas, ceremonial chambers. Later, their descendants, the Pueblo peoples such as the Hopi, Zuni, and Taos, carried on traditions of farming maize, beans, and squash. They developed advanced irrigation to bring water to their fields, creating green life in desert soil. Religion infused daily life. The Hopi, for example, still hold ceremonies with Kachina spirits, believed to bring rain and blessings. Every dance, mask, and song carries deep symbolic meaning, connecting people with the forces of nature. Meanwhile, the Navajo, Dine, and Apache arrived later from the north. The Navajo became skilled shepherds, raising sheep and weaving world-renowned textiles. Their sand paintings used in healing ceremonies remain one of the most beautiful expressions of native spirituality. The Apache, fierce warriors and raiders, became known for their mobility and skill in adapting to the rugged terrain. They lived in wickiups, brush shelters, and moved frequently, blending farming, hunting, and raiding into their way of life. Moving north, we reach the Great Basin, stretching across Nevada, Utah, and parts of Oregon and Idaho. This is a land of dry deserts, salt flats, and mountain ranges. Resources were scarce, and survival required flexibility. The Shoshone, Paiute, and Ute lived in small, mobile groups. They gathered pine nuts, seeds, roots, and hunted small game. Housing was simple, brush shelters or caves, easy to build and abandon as families followed seasonal foods. What may seem like a marginal existence was, in truth, a way of life built on deep knowledge of the land. The Great Basin peoples understood which plants were edible, which roots could heal, and how to live in balance with nature's cycles. In striking contrast, California was one of the richest cultural regions in North America. With its rivers, coasts, and forests, it supported more than 100 distinct tribes. The Chumash along the coast were expert seafarers, building plank canoes called tomals to fish and trade across the Channel Islands. The Pomo were master basket weavers, creating intricate designs that were both functional and works of art. Salmon runs, acorns, deer, and shellfish provided abundant food. Villages were permanent, and ceremonial life was rich with songs, dances, and sacred rituals tied to the cycles of nature. California's cultural diversity was as vibrant as its landscapes, with languages, traditions, and art forms as varied as anywhere on Earth. Between the Cascade Range and the Rocky Mountains lies the Plateau region. Here, the Nez Perce, Spokane, and Yakama made their homes along rivers and valleys. Fishing, especially for salmon, was central. Great fish weirs and nets stretched across rivers to capture the seasonal runs. The salmon was not only food but a sacred gift, honored in ceremonies that thanked the rivers and spirits for their abundance. Villages often used pit houses, semi-subterranean dwellings that stayed cool in summer and warm in winter. The Nez Perce later became renowned horsemen, raising strong horses like the Appaloosa after the arrival of European horses. If there was a native region of abundance, it was the Pacific Northwest coast. From Alaska down to Oregon, peoples like the Tlingit, Haida, Kwakiutl, and Coast Salish lived in a world of towering forests, teeming rivers, and rich seas. Massive cedar trees provided wood for plank houses, canoes, and totem poles, monumental carvings that told family histories and myths. Wealth here wasn't measured in gold but in generosity. The famous potlatch ceremonies were feasts where chiefs gave away goods to assert status and build alliances. It was a culture of prestige built on sharing, not hoarding. Art flourished, masks, carvings, and textiles, with designs that remain iconic today. Spiritual life centered on the animals and spirits of the land and sea. The salmon, returning year after year, was both a source of life and a sacred symbol. Finally, we journey to the Arctic, where the Inuit, Aleut, and Yupik peoples thrived in one of the most extreme environments on Earth. Here, survival meant mastery of ice and sea. The Inuit hunted seals, whales, and walruses using harpoons from kayaks and umiaks. Dog sleds carried them across snow and ice. Their homes shifted with the seasons, igloos of snow in the winter, tents of skins in the summer. Clothing was expertly crafted from caribou and seal skins, layered for warmth and waterproofing. But Arctic life wasn't just survival. It was filled with song, dance, and storytelling. Myths spoke of the northern lights as spirits dancing in the sky. Shamans connected people to the unseen world through rituals and chants. From the desert pueblos to the icy seas, from cedar forests to salmon rivers, the native peoples of the West and North built cultures as diverse as the landscapes they inhabited. Each adapted to their environment with skill, creativity, and spirit. Each carried traditions that bound them to the land, to their ancestors, and to the future. In our final part, we will look at the shared traditions and legacies of Native America, the role of storytelling, ceremonies, art, and resilience, and how these traditions continue to live on in Native communities today. Part 3. We've journeyed across the forests, rivers, deserts, and mountains of North America, meeting the many nations who called these lands home. Each region, each people, had its own ways of living, speaking, and believing. Yet across this diversity, there were threads that bound Native America together, values, traditions, and worldviews that still resonate today. This final chapter of our story explores those shared traditions, the resilience of Native peoples through centuries of change, and the enduring legacies that shape America even now. If there is one tradition that unites Native America, it is the spoken word. Stories were, and are, the libraries of Native peoples. Without written alphabets, history was carried in the minds of storytellers, passed from one generation to the next. Creation myths explained the origins of the world, the Iroquois story of Sky Woman, who fell through a hole in the sky and landed on the back of a great turtle, giving birth to the earth itself. The Lakota story of White Buffalo Calf Woman, who brought the sacred pipe and teachings of balance. The Inuit tales of Raven, a trickster who shaped the world with wit and cunning. These stories were not just entertainment. They were guides for living, teaching lessons of courage, respect, humility, and harmony with nature. Even today, elders gather children in circles to tell these same stories, keeping alive the voices of ancestors. Ceremony was at the center of native life. Every harvest, every hunt, every season had its rituals. Among the Plains nations, the Sun Dance was a time of renewal, where dancers fasted, prayed, and gave of themselves for the good of the people. Among the Southwest Pueblo, ceremonies with Kachina dancers called down rain and fertility for the crops. In the Northwest Coast, potlatches brought communities together in feasts of generosity, storytelling, and song. Across the continent, the Sweat Lodge was, and still is, a sacred place of purification, prayer, and vision. For native peoples, the sacred was not confined to temples or churches. It was everywhere, in rivers, mountains, stones, animals, and stars. Life itself was a ceremony, and every act carried spiritual meaning. Art has always been a voice of Native America. Intricate beadwork, pottery, weaving, carving, and painting were not only beautiful but deeply symbolic. Designs carried meanings, clan symbols, spiritual visions, cosmic patterns. The Navajo weavings, with their bold geometric designs, tell stories of harmony and balance. The Haida totem poles rise like living books, recording family histories and mythic tales. The Pueblo pottery, painted with black and red designs, reflects cycles of nature and spirit. Music and dance were equally important. Drums, flutes, rattles, and chants filled ceremonies with rhythm and power. Dance was not just performance, it was prayer, a way to connect body and spirit to the cosmos. When Europeans arrived, native peoples faced upheaval unlike anything before. Disease swept across the continent, killing millions. Wars and forced removals tore nations from their homelands. Governments outlawed ceremonies, banned languages, and tried to erase traditions. The Trail of Tears, the loss of the buffalo, the boarding schools where native children were stripped of their culture, all left deep scars. Yet through it all, native peoples endured. They carried their songs, their stories, their languages, sometimes in secret, sometimes in defiance, always with resilience. Today, native traditions live on. Across North America, native nations continue to practice ceremonies, speak ancestral languages, and share cultural knowledge with new generations. Powwows bring together drummers, dancers, and singers in celebration. Storytellers revive ancient myths for modern audiences. Native artists blend tradition with innovation, creating beadwork, films, music, and literature that speak to both past and present. Native leaders also play a vital role in protecting the land. From the Standing Rock protests against pipelines to forest and salmon conservation in the Northwest, native voices continue to remind America of its responsibility to the earth. And perhaps most importantly, native peoples are reclaiming identity and pride. Schools teach native history not as a footnote, but as a foundation of the continent. Young people are learning their languages, wearing traditional regalia, and standing tall in the knowledge of who they are. Across all the nations of North America, certain values echo again and again. Respect for the earth, the land is not property, but relative, something to be cared for and honored. Community and generosity, the well-being of the group is more important than individual wealth. Balance and harmony, life is a circle, and every action ripples outward into the world. Resilience and identity, despite centuries of challenges, native peoples remain, carrying forward traditions into the future. These are values that not only shaped Native America, but that can inspire all of us today. So our journey comes full circle. We began with the first peoples of the forests, plains, deserts, and coasts. We saw how the land shaped their lives, how traditions bound them to nature and to one another. And we've seen how, even through hardship and change, those traditions endure. The story of Native America is not one of disappearance, but of resilience. It is not locked in the past, but alive in the present, in song, in ceremony, in language, in the heartbeat of the drum. And as we reflect on this story, we are reminded of something essential: the first peoples of this continent are not just part of history. They are part of America today, and their traditions will continue to guide its future. Thank you for traveling with us. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and share your thoughts in the comments. Your support is important to us.